The term precedent study is thrown around a lot in your first 4 years of architecture school, and yet nobody ever formally teaches you how to analyse a piece of architecture in the context of specifically informing your design project. Today I'm going to show you how I analyse a precedent, and we're going to put it into practice by looking at some Maggie centres in the UK. I'm currently using these to inform my dissertation project, and I want to show you how to streamline your time and get the most out of your precedent study, so that you can walk away with what you need and not just a big lump of unnecessary information. For context, the building that I'm designing is employing the principles of healing architecture. I was inspired by the Maggie Centre typology that provides care and relief for cancer patients through the most difficult time of their lives. I believe that the principles of the Maggie Centre could be used in the context of life as well as death, and so I explored the architecture of these buildings to better understand why they're so successful. It's important to have a clear idea of what you want to create before you begin searching for a precedent. Having a coherent concept and knowing the outcomes that you want to achieve with your design will help you narrow down your search for a precedent to examine. A common problem that I see architecture students doing is they decide what they want to build after looking at a precedent for inspiration. This rarely results in a compelling piece of architecture because there's no natural force guiding you through the design process. After you've completed your site analysis and you've decided on a function for your building, or you've been given a function in your brief, then it's good to sit back and really think about what you want to achieve with your design. What I mean is, how do you want people to experience your building? How do you want people to feel to be in that space? How should it interact with the site and the context? And how do you make it so that it isn't just a building that could be anywhere in the world, that it is uniquely linked to that site? You want to begin thinking about your own architectural language that you can breathe into this project too. It's good to experiment with materials and forms, but every architect has that one thing that they always come back to, and it's uniquely theirs. If you're designing a project without these values at the top of your list, then you're going to end up with a really shallow design. The next step before looking at a precedent is to develop your concept. Now, this is obviously the most interesting part of the process because it's from this one idea that the rest of your project grows from. However, don't fall into the trap of a cliché or vague concept. Everyone wants to be the one that nails down that perfectly unique concept with an equally unique building. But remember, you are undergrad students. Nobody is expecting you to reinvent the wheel, so don't make it so hard for yourself. Make sure that your concept is interesting and different enough that it will develop into an inspirational piece of architecture, but grounded enough that you can actually research buildings that have used similar concepts and strategies. An amazing concept is all well and good, but if you can't find another building to look at, you're going to get very stuck very fast. This is the point where you really separate the good from the bad precedent studies. There are 3 key points that you must satisfy before looking beyond the ArchDaily cover page. These are scale, function, and climate. Now, this might sound obvious at first, but when the pressure's on and deadlines are coming up, we tend to ignore these things just to have something up on the wall. A large-scale building will have different needs for services, toilets, hallway dimensions, so make sure that the building you're looking at is within the ballpark of your prospective design. Large-scale projects tend to have less inspiring small-scale design freedom and tend to be more focused on the bigger picture concept. Whereas in small pieces of architecture, every single decision is deliberate and calculated. Function, as in it has a very similar purpose to your proposed building. This can be the difference between a seafood restaurant and an American diner. They're both restaurants, but they have an entirely different set of needs. Be as specific as you can when searching for a precedent here. Climate, as in a building design in California just doesn't work in Donegal. Ireland and the UK are pretty fortunate in that they have more or less the same climate spread across the region and a plethora of architectural practices to look for inspiration from. When you're looking for a precedent in your cool temperate climate, then you should be really careful to select projects from a similar climate, as the material selection, the services, the installation and the structural requirements will remain similar. Warm climate buildings tend to have ventilation strategies aimed at keeping the sun out and fresh cool air coming in, whereas in Ireland it's more or less the opposite. So now that you have 2 or 3 precedents chosen, it's time to ask yourself what made you choose them. This will help you focus your research. You don't need to look at every aspect of your building if you're only really interested in 1 or 2 different parts of it. Of all the Maggie centres in the UK, these 3 took my interest because they all done something different that I wanted to bring to my design. Maggie's Oxford, designed by Wilkinson Eyre Architects, brings the treehouse concept to life by raising the building on timber pilotis, mirroring the forest that is built beside. The building hugs its landscape by shaping itself around the existing trees while tiptoeing lightly over the ground on raised pilotis. This minimal impact on the ground conserves the natural habitat for flora and fauna and elevates the building to allow views into the canopy of trees. This unique perspective into nature promotes healing for the patients. The tripartite scheme both conceptually hugs the trees in the landscape and strategically groups interior spaces around a central kitchen space, which is iconic of the Maggie Centre brief. Part of the principles of holistic care is the relationship between mind, body and soul. And I knew that conceptually my building was going to reference these by separately grouping the spaces that pertain to mind, body and soul, and then connecting them with the central hearth that acts as an entrance and a focal point. What I really need to pay attention to is what spaces are getting the most or least amount of natural light. How are they orientated? What spaces are large or small? And how is circulation handled between the 3 separate wings? I also looked at the timber columns and the framework elements that allowed for elevated views without compromising the landscape. These are the snippets of information that you can bring with you to your design. There's an old saying, steal like an artist, and I think that rings very true here. Maggie's Lanarkshire was designed by Rake and Hall Architects and was inspired by the site's history as a country manor's private gardens. The architects used this unique history to develop their walled garden concept. The thick perforated walls made of handmade Danish brick bound the gardens in a delicate balance of openness and privacy. The aspect that drew me to Lanarkshire was their integration of external courtyards into the scheme. Again, going back to the tenets of healing architecture, the ability for a patient to see the sky and the landscape and hear the birds can greatly improve their mental well-being. I knew that I wanted to incorporate some internal gardens into my design, so I looked at the strategies that Rake and Hall used. A good way of getting into the mind of a building is to simply trace it out, section and plan. The act of your pen outlining the walls, the glazing and the openings can allow your mind to better understand the building than by simply looking at it. Through this act, I realised that the southern courtyard stretched deeper into the plan and bordered an external wall which allowed views outside the building. This was clearly a strategic decision to maximise solar gains and bring that natural light deep into the plan while still providing a private, intimate outdoor space. The use of thick perforated brick walls to balance the idea that this is a place that you should feel welcomed into, and once you're inside it's private, is a beautiful concept that I wanted to bring to my design. Maggie's Manchester, designed by Foster and Partners, was conceptually envisioned as being a domestic atmosphere in a garden setting, inspired by the standard garden trellis. The aspect that drew me to Foster's building was how the orientation and the spaces within were organised around the path of the sun as it travels around the building. This was then realised through a highly legible plan which links back to the ideas of healing architecture, where a building should be easy to understand from the front door. The private clinics and consultation rooms are aligned east to get the early morning light and to avoid overheating through the day. The group rooms and lounges are aligned south to get large amounts of natural light and to allow solar gains to heat those spaces for the day. The entrance, kitchen and dining spaces are aligned west to capture afternoon light, a time often associated with eating meals and the time that a new patient was most likely to enter the building. The library and exercise room is aligned north to avoid excessive sun glare and overheating in these spaces and to make them more comfortable through the day. Staff spaces are separated to a mezzanine level, and a buffer zone of services and stairs comes between the private counselling spaces and the social zones on the ground floor. This idea of using time and space to organise your programme was something that I wanted to bring to my design, and perhaps combine it with the tripartite plan from Oxford to get a coherent layout of spaces that react to the sun as it moves over the site. Obviously, I realise that these seem like really simple investigations, but the information that I learned is enough to get me started on sketch design. The rest will fall into place depending on your building program, your site and your concept. How you conduct your precedent study is your business, and as long as you get the information you need, it doesn't matter. Having the skill of being able to critically analyse one or two elements will save you hours on your future projects. It's a skill that's taken me nearly 4 years to learn. I hope you find this video helpful, and I hope it gets you on your way with future projects. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow some momentum and it lets me know that you're enjoying the content. I'm going to continue making videos on the design process, and I might also start a series on technology and passive design at an undergraduate level. You can find my website in the description where you can pick up some free resources. And if you haven't seen my site analysis video, then you can catch it at the end of this. Thanks. Larne.